but also I would like to go another way and not talk too much about energy and technical aspects of architecture, but about more quality of life in the city for all species. So I would like to talk a little bit about what's green architecture and about the connection or disconnection between humans and other species, which brings us, of course, to biodiversity. And then I would like to talk a little bit about the power of design thinking. I'll step aside a little bit that you can better see these. And then we'll come, of course, not only with woebewolkels, but also in principle that you have to start every journey with small steps. And then we come to a system approach. And I hope I'll finish all that in 15 minutes and still at least leave you with many questions for the discussion which we'll have after the break. I'm running an architecture office, Lehner Gunther, and I have to say I have developed an interest in communication about architecture, maybe even more than my love for architecture. And I met with Maaike van Stiphout, who is a landscape architect of DS Landscape Architects here on Overton in Amsterdam. And we came together and talked about various aspects of architecture and thought, why not think about to come up with something new, which of course will not be architecture only and will not be landscape architecture only. And talking about the way we would approach projects before the project actually would start. So kind of a research project, which has been going on for more than a year now. And so what came out of it so far I would like to share with you today. I'm very happy about, Paul, that you told us that there hasn't been so much development in the last 20 years if we come to green architecture and the technology used. If we look at green architecture today, these are the projects that come up to your mind. Green architecture, either having gardens in the facade on high-rise towers by Stefano Boeri in Italy, having green roofs by big famous Danish architectural office on the housing. Of course you come to Ken Yang, who does have a vision of a skyscraper city including green architecture and a landscape in it. And you come to, for example, this building by Herzog de Meuron with a green walls. So you have green surfaces on top, green walls, green in between the facade on all parts of the building, and of course also within the building with these wonder wall projects. If you go back, let's say, to the 90s, I also studied in Delft, and of course you come to Mechanos Library, where the people are actually skating and skiing in the winter on top of this green roof. But you also come to this beautiful project called NEXTCity in Osaka, who also included these two aspects actually in a very similar way. If you're going back a little bit further, and of course you probably hear from my accent that I'm born in Austria, then you would come to either these architecture projects by Hundertwasser, and actually Hundertwasser he started 81 with the idea to have one room in a house left to nature completely, called it Baummieter, a renter, a tree who rents the room. And I passed along that these tramway tracks for many, many years in my study in Vienna. It's still there. Also Vrij Otto, much more known for very different projects, the Olympic Games in Munich, had this beautiful Öko house in Berlin, actually from the IBA 84, even more time ago than when it was starting to be realized, 89 to 91. And even if you would go back to the 60s, here we have, I'm sorry, it's not that I'm completely fan of this guy or how he presents his stories. We have Hundertwasser again, 60s hippie style, really urging the people to care for the planet. In a way, it's 50 years later, and many things having been said then are still relevant today, maybe even on a larger scale. And here you have another architect in Canada, Ontario, who did a green roof, 1960, really large building with isolation, all the advantages coming from here. The interesting thing about it, this is a project by Jean Nobel, is it's always about the greenness, about the architecture. So what is the green actually, we were wondering. So we took a closer look to how these facades are built up and how they are technically done with irrigation system and all these aspects. And then by taking an even closer look, we saw that there's something else to green architecture which has never been mentioned by the architects as one of the major aspects in architecture. That's all the other species except these plants that can stand life in the city. So we thought, well, let's have a look into these other species except the human being who are living in the green architecture or in our city of the future. So where are the other species? And why did we never hear about them? So if we look at today's discussion, maybe even similar to 50 years ago, we have Edelkort from Design Academy in Eindhoven who says, gaan samenleven met leven. We live together with others who live. And of course that is always a little bit vague and open for interpretation, but we thought maybe she thinks about the same things we are referring to. And if you look at the other trend watcher, Ajit Bakas, he says, people want to be uber eco, so they want to be more green than green, they want to have the most of it and they would like to pay for it too. So we thought that's an interesting development, an interesting trend they are looking at. So we thought, but why are the animals never published? Because if you look here today, some people have their animals really, really close, and I don't know if you know this project, but all these people are wearing clothes knitted from the hair of their dogs. So how close can you be with animals? And there's many of those photographing people who have dogs or cats and then portraying them both, that they look alike much more over the years. And so on the one hand side we have the animals really, really close, selected species are very close to us, but other species are a red square in a cellophane envelope. So we thought, what's happening? Because I mean, there's many more images like those about mass animal farming. So we thought, when have we been disconnected from the animals? Because if you look, this is a Golden Age painting in Holland, and Jan Steen, I think, and you see here, you have in the church, you have the dog, there are paintings with the cows in it and the horses attending church service. This is a brothel scene. Again, animals within, of course, some dogs. This is a house, a room, woonkamer. The pigs peeking through the door inside. So it has been much more common to have a home for more species than it's today. And I'm so happy about this Dutch word, as I'm not Dutch from origin. The uitspanning. It's originally, of course, a place where you could have a rest for your horses and would structure your traveling. And what remains is that we, the humans, have the uitspanning, so we can relax because the horses have gone. And so there has been a connection between the other species and the humans, and it was, of course, to the advantage of the human. Simply put, you didn't have a fridge, so it was good to have the meat close by. You couldn't, if you would like to eat meat, of course, the freshness would be one of the arguments, but also the logistics. You didn't have to have a lot of transportation, which Powell pointed out is still today one of the largest CO2 footprints. You would have safety about your animals because you could have supervised them or care for them. It would bring energy and warmth. In alpine regions you would have farmhouses stacked, and you have on the lower floor you would have the goats or the cows, and then you would live on top of them to save energy costs because they would produce warmth already. Not only the people are going towards the city, also the animals are, because we have mass industrialized farming. Well, and you can imagine there's not a lot of animals staying within these fields. So a city providing shelter, providing food, providing protection, warmth is an ideal goal for the animals to go to. So still biodiversity declines to the most of the researchers' results, but in cities it declines much less than on the countryside. There's even research trying to prove that biodiversity grows within the city as we speak. So we thought this is an interesting development. And we have the Biennale in Rotterdam, Architecture Biennale, Urban by Nature, and they talk about veerkracht. I don't know what that is in English.
Resilience.
Resilience. And we had a debate with Amsterdam. De natuur redt zich wel. Whatever the conditions are, animals, the nature, they will cope with it in a way. This is one of the Aware exhibition. They show about this resilience. But this is all animals photographed by CCTV, by control cameras in New York. Living, at least documented by CCTV. And that's quite some animals high in the ranking of, if you look at food chains in Manhattan. And if you had a look, we use this image, which we didn't create ourselves, but we all know these eyes were on this piece of ice, knowing nowhere to go, and maybe we'll meet them. Not here, but in New York. It's feasible for an ice bear to travel to New York on the smallest piece of ice going there. So these collages we thought are very inspiring to think differently about this coexistence in the city. And this is a campaign, of course, I had to show you. It's by National Geographic, and it's because of all these hype about the selfies, portraits you take yourself with your mobile phone, which are so easy to use that probably maybe these people, maybe these animals live next door in your house. Check if this door is always locked. But in short, to wrap it up, the animals, they are looking for basic needs within the city. It's provision. This is a picture from Canada. And they look for nesting areas. I don't know if you can see it. This is an African penguin nesting within a sewer opening of the road in South Africa. So they will manage, as we heard already. And then comes in the idea about architects and landscape architects. There is a power in design thinking. We actually can exactly know what sizes of openings and measurements are required to put nesting areas to certain kinds of animals. Has been studied, and if it's a little bit larger, then another animal would enter. So this has been catalogued for all kinds of different climates and different surroundings. But these are the animals who would like our Amsterdam or other Western European city. And what we are trying with this NEXTCity project is to make these first steps, not to put like a bird's nest on the facade afterwards, but make it an integral part of how to make this green architecture of the future. To integrate it in building parts, or to add them onto. These are examples by Eindhoven students. For birds, there's a lot going on. Probably Paul, you also know from BREEAM certification. Bats, bat is one of the darlings for certification. So there have been bat towers, bat clouds, a bat bridge actually by Dutch architects, next architects. And they found out that if they change the lighting on roads, bats tend to be not distracted by the lighting and can use their habitat much better. I took a really, really small, also looking at the food chain, then you come to the insects and the bees. I will not talk about bees because a lot has been talked about bees, completely legitimately. But there's many other insects and there's many different possibilities, like a bench that's also an insect hotel or a freestanding building or something in your garden or in a park. Elements that are still loosely, but we are more interested in looking at how to make it to an integral concept. If you make a little bit bigger steps, you come to the notion that animals need to connect within the city, and if you go through the Veluwe, you know that there is these ecoducts, think it's a Dutch word actually, ecoduct. So that's important for the other species, like it is for humans when they use the city, that they can reconnect. And this is, I think, Dallas, and they have the idea of a green grid, what they call, so that they really realize through fairs and the web of connections to enable and foster not only the humans but biodiversity. So we thought, studying a lot of projects, what could be these advantages for today, and why could it be interesting for TNT or for private clients to invest in biodiversity? There is an ecologic value, because you help increase biodiversity. There's a cultural value of keeping local animals. Economic value. There's really nice examples where they changed chemical pesticides with plants that attracted insects that would naturally take care of the animals would hurt the grain otherwise. It's in the south of Rotterdam. And then what happened, not only the fields and the agriculture looked nicer, but also the market prices of the houses next to the fields rose, because it was a nicer setting to live in. There's a value for public health, of course, the plants to produce oxygen, they're cleaning the air. People move more in green neighborhoods, that has been shown in research, coming to social value and value for microclimate. And there's even bacteria who would change your polluted ground. So it's interesting to think about the system, how to get these kind of species within the city. And it's not, of course, Holland, and so we try to make things makeable, to map things, and to find ways how to use design. This is food chains, and we are here, we're here, of course, on the outside. We are not eaten by anyone else so far. So you really have to approach this topic within the system, not only as a food chain, but what they call a food web. And they found out that there is certain rules between how these food webs work. What are the aspects you could influence by design to foster ideally growing food webs? So that's what we're interested in. I thought this is a really nice last image before we start into discussion, to leave you confused, but maybe on a higher level. Maybe about our project in short. There's various other disciplines involved. People from biology, people from planning, users, developers. And we're doing a case in Amsterdam, in Krukjes, in the eastern former harbour part. And the idea is to use biodiversity as a development path, a roadmap how to develop this area, which has to do with branding, of course, and image, and investing and getting money, but also with the main target to increase biodiversity in a heavily polluted and very interesting area. So you can follow us, of course, on NEXTCity.nl, and I hope that we'll meet at some of the other events we're doing. Thank you for your attention.